Is Galbrena worth investing more into now that we know her weapon passive? Let's talk about it. My name is Deuce, and let's get into it. So, Kuro Games recently officially revealed Galbrena's weapon passive. We now know what her signature weapon is going to do, and we know the general details of what she might end up doing. So, her signature weapon is able to increase her attack, give her heavy attack damage amplification, and of course, give her echo skill damage amplification, while also having Death Ignore on the weapon. All around, a very packed signature. As always, wuwa signatures tend to be very broken for their main DPSs. This is nothing new at this point. However, is it worth the investment in Galbrena's case? Well, let's think about it like this. First of all, Static Mist has just always been a really nice standard pair of pistols. In Carlotta's case, she was very easily able to get away with using Static Mist, though you could argue that's just due to the fact that her own baseline is very high, so having to use a standard weapon wasn't really that much of a detriment to her. Last Dance is definitely better, true, but because Carlotta just does so much damage at a baseline, she genuinely feels perfectly fine on Static Mist, and I do wonder if Galbrena is going to feel the same, because generally, while Static Mist doesn't really provide that much that's specific, it's still a pretty good generalist weapon. After all, it's able to provide crit rate and some energy regen. We're not going to know how much she's going to need energy regen until she actually drops. However, it's a nice little bonus to have, and crit rate is always nice. The value of the incoming Resonator's attack increase is going to depend on what type of team you're playing. Like, if you have Shorekeeper on the end, that's just not really going to matter. But if you have somebody like Lupa on the end, then it's going to be a nice little bonus. So you do have Static Mist as an alternate option. You don't really need to invest extra into her if you just want to use that instead. However, what if you have Last Dance? Well, we should consider that, judging from Galbrena's signature weapon, there are two particular things that she likes. Echo skill damage increase, which obviously no of her pistols is going to provide her, and heavy attack damage increase. That is a little bit more likely to find. However, Last Dance provides resonant skill damage bonus. But to accompany, it also gives you a lot of crit damage and also some attack percent. So it is a good weapon for her, and I do imagine that it's going to end up being a strong choice. However, it's obviously not going to be as good as her Sig. Generally, Static Mist and Last Dance are so high quality that we're just kind of able to use them on most pistols user and see good results. So, even if you don't end up pulling for her signature weapon, you're still going to be fine. Woodland Aria does exist as well, but the issue of Woodland Aria is that most of its passive is locked behind erosion mechanics, and it's kind of just wasted on Galbrena, because I imagine that if you pulled such a niche signature weapon, considering that weapons in this game are guaranteed, it's probably being used for your Shakona. However, with that being said, it does still provide a lot of crit rate and attack percent, so there is an incentive to use it even outside of using its passive. But honestly, I think that Static Mist is just going to end up being better than it, unless that extra crit rate is really going to make the difference in your build. So, with all that in mind, when it comes to the 5-star weapons at least, I think that if you're a free-to-play, you're definitely going to be fine in terms of Galbrena's weapon options, simply because Static Mist is just a genuinely good standard 5-star weapon. Out of all the standard 5-star weapons, I generally think that it's one of the better ones. Meaning that you don't really have to push for additional investment into her. This was pretty nice because with Carlotta you were also able to skip out on the signature, and it wouldn't really feel like that much of a detriment. So if you don't really have that many Astrites on you right now, but you would still like to pull for Galbrena, well then that is still something that you can consider. And I would say that if you pulled for Last Dance before, you don't really need to go out of your way to invest into this new signature weapon. It's quite specific obviously as you would expect, and I feel like the general stat stick of Last Dance is going to be just fine for you. Yes, it doesn't have any of the specific things that Galbrena likes, but I don't necessarily think that it's going to be that much of a detriment. As to whether the weapon itself is worth it, well, it does give some attack percent in general, so that does help its overall value. However, echo skill damage is a very niche stat at the minute, but I do think that it's something that's going to be expanded upon in the future. So I would say that if you're on the fence about this weapon, there's not really any need to pick it up now because like I said, I do believe that the alternatives are good enough to compensate. However, I do see the potential for this weapon to maybe get better in the future. However, you should keep in mind that generally speaking, it is very rare that we get weapons that are really good on future characters, unless your name is Stringmaster, because weapons are just so specific these days, and their conditions are really good for the individual characters that they were tailor-made for. Most of our pistol users are just also not going to be able to access the Death Ignore. So then that begs the question, let's say that you only have Static Mist, or maybe you don't even have that, and you finally want to invest in your first pair of limited 5-star pistols. In that case, is Lux and Umbra going to be a good choice for your first pair of limited 5-star pistols? Well, the base attack is really high on it. It's 587. That's the same as Static Mist. And while the crit damage is a lot lower than Last Dance, it has the base attack to compensate. 48.6% crit damage is still a very high amount, and it provides 12% attack in its passive. The rest of the passive is inaccessible. Basically, every other DPS is not going to be seeing those buffs, which arguably creates a Woodland Aria situation. But I would say that because this weapon provides such solid base attack, and it also has some nice crit damage on it, and all around the stat sticks are there, I would say that it is basically just as good of an investment as Last Dance. I don't really want to put one above the other. I will say that Last Dance is definitely a lot more accessible though. And what I mean by this is that you don't need any sort of echo skill damage dealt in order to access the Resonance skill damage bonus. So if we simply ever get a Resonator in the future that's able to very easily abuse the Resonance skill damage bonus contained within Last Dance, then that weapon is only going to continue to gain value. I don't really think you can go wrong either way with investing into either of them, but I do think Last Dance has the edge for that particular reason. Its passive is less niche, and I would say that it's going to be more useful in the future. However, only time can really tell in that particular aspect, because ultimately, maybe Kuro Games just isn't going to make another skill damage bonus Resonator for a hot minute, especially considering that Carlotta already kind of fulfills that role, and they're likely looking to other damage types to fill the pistols niche. Especially because we just don't really get many other pistols users. So whenever you consider all of that, you could argue that it kind of balances itself out a bit, because yeah, sure, Last Dance definitely has a more accessible passive, but is that actually going to be capitalized on? Because that is rarely ever the case, to be honest. Like I said, unless your name is Stringmaster, because Stringmaster is broken. But you get the idea. So I think that Lux and Umbra is a good investment, basically as good as Last Dance. I would say that Last Dance has had a longer time in the meta, and we've known what it can do for a while now. Not to mention that I feel like their investment value seems to be about equal at the minute. But I really would consider that with Lux and Umbra, all of the goodies are activated upon dealing echo skill damage. Now, if we ever get more characters like that, awesome. But for the time being, there's nothing that can really be said about that other than let's hope we get more characters like that, because basically only Galbrena is going to be able to access the rest of the goodies. It's basically like using Shacona's weapon on another pistols user. Like, yes, you're getting the stat sticks, but you're fully aware that you're missing out on basically everything that the passive is providing because you're using it on a non-erosion character, and you just kind of make that sacrifice and you're fully aware, yes, I'm not getting the full passive out of this, but it's just for the stats. And I feel like it's going to be the same with Lux and Umbra. Is it some amazing standout weapon like Stringmaster? No, not necessarily. It's basically another good Wuthering Waves 5-star weapon. You invest into it if you feel like you need it. You invest into it if you feel like you want to get it for your account in general or just for your Galbrena. I would say that for Galbrena herself, and if you're wondering whether it's worth it for her, obviously we're going to have to actually wait for the character to come out and testing and such to happen. However, I do think that you're very easily going to be able to get away with 5-star weapon alternatives. This doesn't really seem like the type of character to me where you need her specific dedicated 5-star signature weapon in order to see her perform. I don't think that it's going to be some ridiculous 30% damage difference because it's just she's a hyper carry, and I don't really think that a fusion hyper carry is going to really have that issue. Yeah, sure, she deals an echo skill damage, but I still just can't really see it being that much of a problem. So, all around, I think that it's a good weapon, and we'll see where it develops from here meta-wise. Do I think that it's really going to go anywhere from here? No, not really. I think Lux and Umbra is just going to be added to the game. It's going to look really cool. It's going to be an amazing Galbrena weapon, and that's pretty much it. I just don't really think that it's going to do much else other than be a really good Galbrena weapon and just generally be a fine enough stat stick on other pistols users. Like, it's not really going to do anything for Carlotta in particular. She can't really do anything with echo skill damage. I will say the weapon very much succeeds in looking absolutely awesome. Galbrena is just very awesome in general, really cool character. But that aside, it's definitely good, I just don't really think it's a necessity, so don't feel FOMO'd into getting it. I know that wuwa DPSs do really want their SIGs ideally, and if you've been saving for Galbrena for a while and you want to main her, I would then advise getting her signature that you main. But generally speaking, I don't think it's some insane investment that's really going to change the course of your account. What's really going to change things on your account is maybe getting a SIG for a DPS that needs it more, or getting a 5-star teammate that's really needed for another character, such as Phoebe for Zani. You get the idea. I personally think that those investments are where it's really at, and Lux and Umbra is just going to be a nice increase to your Galbrena. I would argue that if you have a Furlova and you're planning to get Galbrena, honestly save those spare asteroids for Choyuan instead. I think that guy has a little bit of hidden meta potential. I've already talked about it at length in a couple of videos, so I would say it's worth saving for him over getting Galbrena's signature if you also have Furlova. I'm specifically glazing him if you have Furlova here, but that is pretty much it. Hopefully this video was able to tell you whether Galbrena's signature weapon is worth investing in or not. This has been Juice, signing out, and you can always just get it for the style points instead.